Liam Carter had everything a man could ever want: youth, wealth, and power. Yet, despite all the luxury surrounding him, there was an emptiness he couldn't shake. At 29, he had built a billion-dollar empire from the ground up, proving himself to the world. But in matters of the heart, he was a failure. He had fallen for Sophia Grant, a stunning socialite with an effortless charm that could melt even the coldest hearts. She had walked into his life like a dream: soft whispers, gentle touches, and a gaze that made him believe in love. For a while, Liam thought he had found something real. Sophia knew all the right words, always praising him for his ambition and intelligence. She told him she loved him, that he was the most extraordinary man she had ever met. And Liam, despite being a man who had built his success by spotting lies and deception in business, had fallen for hers. At first, it was subtle: a comment here, a request there. Nothing alarming. She'd sigh about how exhausting it was to drive herself around, and the next day, Liam had a brand new luxury car delivered to her doorstep. She'd mention how stressed she was, and he'd book an extravagant vacation to the Maldives. It felt good, at first, to take care of her, to make her happy, but over time, the pattern became clear. The day Liam realized the truth, it wasn't dramatic. There was no heated argument or sudden betrayal. It was quiet, unsettling in its simplicity. He had come home late from a business meeting, exhausted but eager to see Sophia. She was in his penthouse, sprawled on the velvet couch, flipping through a fashion magazine. "You're late," she murmured without looking up. Liam smiled, expecting her to ask how his day was. "Yeah, the meeting ran long. Tough negotiations." Sophia turned a page lazily. That's nice. By the way, there's a gala next Friday. I need something new to wear." Liam leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. "You have an entire closet full of designer dresses." She finally looked up, her perfectly sculpted brows drawing together. "Liam, don't be ridiculous. Everyone's already seen those. I need something fresh, something that stands out." That was the moment it hit him. There was no warmth in her eyes, no curiosity about his day, no concern about his exhaustion. Just another demand, another expectation that he would cater to her every whim. He felt something in his chest tighten. "What if I said no?" he asked, testing the waters. Sophia blinked, then laughed, as if he had told a joke. "Oh, Liam, don't be silly. I'm your girlfriend. Isn't it natural for you to want me to look my best?" That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He replayed their relationship in his mind, every moment that now felt like a transaction. Was there ever a time sanction? Was there ever a time she had loved him for who he was, not for what he could give her? He wanted to believe so, but deep down, he knew the truth. The next morning, he decided he wouldn't confront her. Not yet. He wasn't the type to cause scenes, but he also wasn't the type to let someone make a fool of him. If Sophia was only staying because of his wealth, he would find a way to make her walk away willingly. He needed a plan, a flawless plan, one that would expose her true nature without him having to lift a finger. And for that, he needed someone unexpected, someone who could shake things up, someone bold, fearless, and completely different from anyone in his world. That's when he met Riley Brooks. Liam didn't believe in fate, but the moment he walked into that garage, he knew he had found exactly what he was looking for. The place smelled of motor oil and metal, a sharp contrast to the world of designer perfumes and crystal chandeliers he was used to. Grease, stained rags, littered the floor. Engines lay open like unfinished puzzles, and the faint sound of rock music played from a dusty radio in the corner. And right in the middle of it all was Riley Brooks. She was nothing like the women Liam usually encountered, those perfectly manicured, elegantly dressed socialites who spoke in carefully measured tones. Riley was the complete opposite. She wore faded jeans, a loose black tank top, and boots that had seen better days. Her dark brown hair was tied back messily, a few stray strands falling over her forehead as she leaned under the hood of an old truck. Liam had expected her to be rough around the edges, but he hadn't expected the fire in her eyes when she finally looked up at him. "Let me guess," Riley said, wiping her hands on a rag. "Some rich guy's car broke down, and now you're lost." Liam smirked. "Not exactly." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Well, unless you need an oil change, I don't see why you're standing in my garage." Liam had done countless business negotiations, but something told him Riley wouldn't be swayed by smooth words or charm. He had to be direct. "I need your help," he said, "and I'll pay you handsomely for it." Riley crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed. "Yeah, what kind of help are we talking about?" Liam leaned against the counter, lowering his voice slightly. "I need you to pretend to be my partner, romantically." For a moment, Riley just stared at him. Then she burst out laughing. It wasn't a polite, reserved chuckle. It was full-on head. Through full-on head. Belly, deep laughter. "That's the funniest thing I've heard all week," she finally said, wiping away a tear. "You want me, a mechanic who smells like gasoline most days, to pretend to be your girlfriend?" Liam kept his expression serious. "Not my girlfriend. My partner." Riley blinked. "Wait, partner?" Liam nodded. "Sophia, my girlfriend, only cares about my money. If she believes I've fallen for someone else, she'll leave. I need someone convincing, someone who doesn't fit into her world at all." Riley tilted her head, considering him. "And you think I'm the perfect misfit for the job?" "Yes." She studied him for a long moment. "And what's in it for me?" 50 grand, Liam said without hesitation. Riley let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's a lot of money just to make some rich girl jealous." "You don't have to do much," Liam said. "Just show up at a few events, act like we're together, make it convincing. You'll walk away richer, and I'll walk away free." Riley ran a hand through her hair, smearing grease across her forehead without realizing it. "And what happens when your girlfriend loses her mind?" "That's the goal," Liam admitted. "She'll throw a fit and leave on her own. No confrontation, no messy breakup, just a clean exit." Riley let out a slow breath, rubbing her chin. "All right, rich boy, you've got yourself a deal." Liam extended his hand. "Do we shake on it?" Riley smirked and took his hand, her grip firm. "Just don't expect me to wear heels." Liam chuckled. "Wouldn't dream of it." As Riley went back to work on the truck, Liam watched her, feeling something unexpected settle in his chest. He had come here looking for a business arrangement, but somehow he had a feeling Riley Brooks was going to change a lot more than just his relationship status. Liam never felt nervous walking into a room until now, as he stepped into the grand ballroom of the Chandler Foundation Gala. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit and stole a glance at the woman beside him. Riley Brooks, dressed in a sleek black suit that hugged her frame perfectly, was the definition of confidence. Her hair was slicked back, her makeup subtle yet striking, and the usual grease stains on her hands were nowhere to be seen. She didn't look like the Riley he had met in the garage. She looked like she belonged here. "You sure you've never been to one of these things before?" Liam murmured as they strolled through the sea of expensive dresses and designer tuxedos. Riley smirked. "Nope, but I've watched enough rich people movies to fake it." Liam chuckled under his breath, but before he could say anything more, a familiar voice rang out from across the room. "Liam!" He turned just as Sophia Grant walked toward them, her silver gown shimmering under the chandelier light. She looked flawless as always, every detail of her appearance carefully curated. But the moment her gaze landed on Riley, something flickered in her eyes. Confusion, curiosity, and then suspicion. Sophia's red lips curled into a small, polite smile. "I didn't know you were bringing a guest tonight." Liam wrapped an arm loosely around Riley's waist, feeling the subtle tension in her posture. She didn't pull away, though. She was playing along perfectly. "Of course," Liam said smoothly. "I wanted you to meet Riley, my partner." Sophia's smile faltered. "Your what?" Riley leaned in slightly, her fingers brushing against Liam's shoulder as she spoke. "I know, it's a shock, right? One minute, he's just my favorite billionaire customer. The next, well, minute, he's just my favorite billionaire." Sophia blinked, struggling to process what she had just heard. "Wait, partner as in?" Riley chuckled, her voice dripping with amusement. "No, sweetheart. Partner as in love." The color drained from Sophia's face. "You're joking." Liam shook his head, keeping his expression calm. "It's not a joke. Sophia, Riley and I, we just fit." Sophia's hands clenched at her sides. "So what? One day you're in love with me, and the next you're suddenly into." She stopped herself, taking a sharp breath. "This is ridiculous, Liam. You don't even understand myself," Liam interrupted, his voice cool and steady. "Maybe you never really knew me as well as you thought." Sophia stared at him, her jaw tight, her eyes flicking back and forth between him and Riley. Riley, ever the performer, took it a step further. She reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from Liam's forehead, the gesture so casual yet intimate that Liam nearly forgot they were acting. "You know," Riley mused, "I really thought you'd be happy for us, but I get it. Change is hard." Sophia's lips parted slightly, like she was about to protest, but she had no words. She had spent years being the one in control, the one with the upper hand. And now, for the first time, she was the one caught off guard. "I don't believe this," she finally muttered, shaking her head. "This isn't real." "Think what you want," Liam said, flashing an easy smile. "But Riley and I are together, and we're very happy." Riley sighed dramatically. "We really are." That was the breaking point. With an angry flick of her hair, Sophia turned on her heel and stormed off, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. As soon as she was out of sight, Riley let out a breath and burst into laughter. "Oh my God!" she gasped, gripping Liam's arm for support. "Did you see her face? I swear, I thought she was going to throw her champagne at me." Liam exhaled, finally relaxing. "That actually went better than I expected." "You're welcome," Riley teased, bumping her shoulder against his. "I told you I was good at this." Liam chuckled. "Yeah, you really were." But as he looked at her, something unsettling stirred inside him, because for a split second, he had almost believed it too. After the gala, things should have gone back to normal. That had been the plan, after all. Stage the perfect lie, let Sophia storm off in a jealous rage, and finally free himself from the suffocating relationship that had held him hostage for far too long. But as the days passed, Liam realized something unsettling. Riley Brooks wasn't just a temporary fix to his problem. She was becoming a problem of her own. At first, it was easy to chalk it up to convenience. She was still playing the role, after all. Whenever they were seen in public together, she kept up the act, draping an arm over his shoulder, flashing him flirtatious smiles, and casually stealing bites from his plate like they'd been together forever. It was natural, effortless, too effortless. And that's what started to get under Liam's skin. Because when they were alone, it wasn't just Riley pretending anymore. He was starting to pretend too. He found himself looking forward to her sarcastic jabs, the way she called him rich boy like it was an inside joke. He started noticing the way she always smelled faintly of motor oil and vanilla, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the way she laughed with her whole body, unapologetic, loud, real. He liked it. He liked her. And that was a problem. One night, after yet another public appearance together, Liam found himself sitting across from Riley at a dimly lit rooftop bar, his glass of bourbon untouched. She was twirling a straw between her fingers, looking out at the glittering city skyline, unaware of the war raging inside his head. "You know," she said, breaking the comfortable silence, "for a guy who has everything, you sure frown a lot." Liam smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Maybe I have a lot to frown about." Riley snorted. "Right, because being a billionaire is so hard." Liam chuckled but didn't argue. Instead, he studied her in the warm glow of the city lights. "Why did you say yes?" he asked suddenly. Riley raised an eyebrow. "To what?" "This. The whole fake relationship thing. 50 grand aside." Riley hesitated, then shrugged. "I like a challenge. And I really like the idea of pissing off your ex." Liam laughed. Mission accomplished. A slow smirk played on her lips as she leaned forward, resting her chin on her palm. "And what about you? Be honest. Did you really hire me just to get rid of Sophia?" Liam hesitated. The answer should have been easy, but it wasn't. "I thought I did," he admitted. "But now, I'm not so sure." Riley's smirk faltered just for a second. What's that supposed to mean? Liam could have lied. He should have lied. Instead, he held her gaze and said, "It means I like having you around." For the first time since they'd met, Riley looked caught off guard. You, you, Liam nodded. Yeah, I do. Riley sat back, crossing her arms. Well, that's dangerous, Carter. Liam arched a brow. Why? Because this was never supposed to be real, she said, her voice quieter than before. Liam swallowed. Maybe real isn't so bad. Riley exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face. Liam, come on. You and I, we live in two completely different worlds. What happens when this little arrangement is over? What then? Liam didn't have an answer, and neither did Riley. Instead, they sat there, the city buzzing around them, the unspoken tension stretching between them like a wire about to snap. What neither of them knew was that across town, Sophia wasn't done yet. She had spent the last few days obsessing over every detail of Liam's new relationship, picking apart every interaction, every smile, every touch, and something didn't sit right with her. Riley Brooks wasn't his type. Liam had always gone for polished, sophisticated women, not grease-stained mechanics with sharp tongues and sharper attitudes, which meant one thing. It was all a lie. And if it was a lie, then Sophia could still win. She just had to prove it. Liam had never been a man to let emotions cloud his judgment, but something about Riley was different. She was slipping into his thoughts at odd moments, disrupting his carefully structured world in ways he hadn't anticipated. This was supposed to be simple. Hire her, make Sophia jealous, and move on. Yet every time she laughed, every time she rolled her eyes at his expensive lifestyle, every time she leaned in just a little too close for their act, it chipped away at the distance he had carefully maintained between himself and others. And that night, everything changed. They were at his penthouse, an impromptu celebration after successfully dodging yet another one of Sophia's prying attempts to catch them slipping. Liam had poured them drinks, whiskey for him, beer for her, because Riley claimed any drink that tasted like a library wasn't worth her time. She was sitting on his couch, feet tucked under her, scrolling through his massive TV selection with a look of pure disinterest. Jesus, Carter. You have like every streaming service known to man, but where's the good stuff? No action movies, no car chases. What the hell am I supposed to watch? Liam smirked from his seat at the bar. I thought you'd be a fan of highbrow cinema. Riley snorted. Oh, yeah, Tool. Let me just sip my $1,000 wine and cry over some sad French film about lost love. She threw him a look. Pick something decent, or I'm putting on a documentary about turtles. Liam walked over and took the remote from her hand. Fine, no turtles. As he browsed, he could feel Riley watching him. What? He asked, not looking up. Nothing, she said, stretching lazily. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. She smirked, but didn't deny it. You know, this whole fake relationship thing is weirdly easy with you. Liam turned to face her fully, curious. Why's that? Riley shrugged. I don't know. You're not as awful as I expected. Liam put a hand over his heart mockingly. Wow, high praise. She grinned, but then her expression shifted. Just a little, just enough for Liam to notice. A flicker of something more. And before he could stop himself, he said the one thing that had been hanging between them for weeks. "This doesn't feel fake." Riley's smile faltered. Liam. He wasn't sure what came over him, but in the next second he was closing the distance between them. It wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't part of their act. It was something else, something neither of them had planned for. His hand brushed against her cheek, testing, waiting for her to pull away. She didn't. And then he kissed her. It wasn't the staged, calculated kind of kiss they had practiced in front of others. It was slow, deep, undeniably real. He felt the way she stiffened for half a second before melting into him, the way her fingers curled slightly into his shirt. When they finally pulled apart, everything had changed. Riley stared at him, wide-eyed, like she had just realized she had made a terrible mistake. Then, before he could say anything, she stood up abruptly. "I should go." Liam blinked. Riley. "Nope. Not doing this." She grabbed her jacket and backed toward the door, like he was dangerous, like what had just happened between them was dangerous. Liam frowned. "Riley, wait!" But she was already gone. And for the first time in his entire life, Liam Carter didn't know what the hell he was supposed to do next. Meanwhile, across town, Sophia was watching. She sat in the back seat of a black car, her private investigator flipping through photos, pictures of Liam and Riley together, the laughter, the looks, the touch. But Sophia knew Liam, and she knew he didn't look at women like that. Not unless it was real. Her lips curled into a slow, wicked smile. This wasn't over. Riley had spent her whole life making smart decisions. Walking away from Liam Carter should have been one of them. Yet, 3 months later, she was staring at the 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, her stomach churning with something far worse than morning sickness. This wasn't supposed to happen. She gripped the sink, her knuckles white, willing herself to breathe. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the test was faulty. Maybe if she took another one, it would tell her what she wanted to hear. But deep down, she already knew the truth. She was pregnant, with Liam Carter's baby. The reality of it hit her like a freight train. She wasn't just carrying a child. She was carrying a billionaire's child. The kind of man who lived in penthouses, who had more money than he could ever spend, who had more money than he could ever spend, who existed in a world that had no place for someone like her. And he had no idea. Riley exhaled sharply, gripping the edges of the sink as she stared at her reflection. She looked the same, but everything inside her had changed. This was real, and she wasn't ready for it. Days passed, and the weight of her decision pressed down on her like a boulder. She had no family, no support system, and barely enough money to get through the month. Raising a baby alone, impossible. So she made the call. The clinic was small, discreet. The doctor, an older man with tired eyes, barely looked up as he flipped through his clipboard. "You're about 3 months along," he said, voice clinical, detached. "If you want to go through with the procedure, it'll cost 300,000 naira. Riley's heart dropped. She had barely scraped together 100,000. Even after selling some of her tools, skipping meals, and working extra hours at the garage, she was nowhere near what she needed. Is there any way to do it for less? She asked hesitantly. The doctor glanced up, his gaze sharp. No discounts, no exceptions. It's risky at this stage. That's the price. Riley clenched her fists. I don't have that kind of money. The doctor sighed, setting his pen down. Then I can't help you. Panic crawled up her spine. Please, she whispered. I can't do this. I don't have a family. I can't take care of a baby, let alone. The doctor's expression didn't change. Miss Brooks, you're carrying twins. The room tilted. Riley grabbed the armrest of the chair, feeling the breath whoosh out of her lungs. The doctor tapped the ultrasound image on his clipboard. 2 heartbeats, 2 babies. A hollow, suffocating silence filled the space between them. Twins. Not 1, 2. It had been hard enough to imagine raising 1 baby alone, but 2. That was an impossible nightmare. She couldn't do this. She wasn't meant to be a mother. She wasn't ready. The doctor sighed again, softer this time. Miss Brooks, I've seen women in your position before. I know you're scared, but maybe you should think about this a little longer before making a decision you can't take back. Riley shook her head, her pulse pounding. You don't understand. I don't have a choice. But the doctor was already closing the file. I'm sorry. My answer is final. Riley stood there, frozen, as her last escape route disappeared. That night, she walked aimlessly through the city, the weight of her reality pressing down on her like an avalanche. She didn't notice the people passing by. She didn't notice the blaring car horns or the neon lights flickering above her. All she could hear was the doctor's voice echoing in her mind. Twins. Twin. She had no money, no support, no way out. And worst of all, no one to turn to. Until, by sheer fate, she did. A soft voice cut through the haze of her thoughts. My dear, are you okay? Riley blinked, looking up to find a well-dressed old woman standing in front of her, concern etched into every line of her face. She had kind eyes, the kind that felt like home even to someone who had never had one. Riley's voice cracked. I don't know what to do. The woman reached out gently. Then, let's figure it out together. And for the first time in months, Riley let herself hope. Riley had spent years learning to survive on her own, never expecting kindness from anyone. So when the older woman led her into a warm, well-furnished home, she felt like she had stepped into someone else's life. The woman introduced herself as Margaret Carter, her voice carrying a soft elegance that made Riley immediately uneasy. This woman wasn't just kind. She was wealthy, and people with money always wanted something in return. You don't have to worry, dear, Margaret said, as if reading Riley's thoughts. I don't expect anything from you. I just couldn't ignore the look on your face. Riley swallowed, glancing around the house. It was beautiful, but not cold like Liam's penthouse. There were family photos on the walls, cozy blankets draped over the couches, and the faint scent of vanilla and fresh flowers in the air. It felt safe. Margaret gestured toward the dining table, where a pot of tea and a plate of cookies sat untouched. Eat something first, then tell me what's troubling you. Riley hesitated, pride and exhaustion battling inside her. But then her stomach twisted painfully, reminding her she hadn't eaten since morning. She sat. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone listened. Margaret didn't interrupt, didn't judge. She simply let Riley speak about growing up an orphan, about struggling to keep her garage afloat, about how she had met a man she never expected to care about. I'm Carter, and how that one reckless night had changed everything. Margaret sat still, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But when Riley finally whispered, I'm pregnant with twins and I have no one, something flickered in the older woman's expression. A deep, knowing sadness. Margaret reached across the table, gently squeezing Riley's hand. You're not alone anymore. Riley wanted to believe her. She really did. But trust was a fragile thing, and she had spent years learning not to rely on anyone but herself. Still, for now, she was too tired to fight. She let herself stay. Days turned into weeks, and against all odds, Riley began to heal. Margaret never pushed her for details, never made her feel like a burden. Instead, she gave her something she had never truly had before, a home. She made sure Riley ate well, took her to doctor's appointments, and even insisted on buying baby clothes despite Riley's grumbled protests. You're having twins, dear, Margaret would say, amused. You're going to need more than a few onesies. Riley still wasn't sure how she had ended up here, in this impossibly soft bed, with fresh sheets, in a house where someone actually cared about her. But a small part of her, a part she had tried to bury, was grateful. Then, one evening, everything changed. Margaret was on the phone talking to someone in a warm, affectionate tone that Riley had learned to love. My son, it's been too long, she said, laughter in her voice. You should come visit this weekend. Riley didn't pay much attention until she heard the name. Liam. Her heart stopped. She sat frozen on the couch, her mind racing. Liam Carter. Margaret Carter's son. Oh, God! The woman who had taken her in, who had cared for her, who had been nothing but kind to her, was the mother of the man she had spent months avoiding. A cold chill ran down Riley's spine. She had to leave, now, but before she could move, Margaret turned to her with a warm smile. Oh, Riley, dear, she said casually. I told Liam all about you. He's coming this weekend. I can't wait for you two to meet. Riley's stomach twisted violently. He was coming, and he had no idea that when he walked through that door, he'd be looking at the mother of his unborn children. Riley barely slept that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing in 100 different directions. Liam was coming. The man she had been running from, the man she had been running from, the man she had convinced herself she would never have to face again, was about to walk through the front door. And when he did, everything would unravel. She thought about packing a bag and slipping out before sunrise. She could disappear, start over somewhere else again. But then she thought about Margaret, the woman who had given her a home, who had cared for her without asking for anything in return. How could she just vanish after everything Margaret had done for her? No, she had to face this. The next morning, Riley was a mess of nerves. She busied herself in the kitchen, hoping that keeping her hands occupied would stop her from completely spiraling. Margaret, completely unaware of the storm raging inside her, hummed happily as she set the table. Liam should be here any minute, she said, pouring coffee into a delicate porcelain cup. I can't wait for you to meet him properly, Riley. He's a good man. Riley forced a tight smile. Yeah, a good man. A good man who has no idea I'm carrying his children. Before she could think of a way to respond, the sound of a car pulling up outside sent a jolt of panic through her veins. It was too late. Liam Carter stepped through the front door. Riley had prepared herself for this moment, or at least she thought she had. But nothing could have braced her for the sheer impact of seeing him again. He looked the same. Too good, too put, together, too effortlessly powerful. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his sharp jawline just as defined as she remembered. But there was something different about him now. Maybe it was the way his shoulders seemed a little tenser. Or maybe it was just the fact that she knew something he didn't. Margaret beamed. Liam, sweetheart, finally. It's been too long. Liam's face softened as he leaned down to kiss his mother on the cheek. I know, Mom. I've been busy. Then his gaze flickered past her, landing directly on Riley. And everything froze. For a moment, Liam just stared. He wasn't the kind of man who got caught off guard easily. He had built his empire on composure, on always being the one in control. But right now, standing in his mother's living room, looking at Riley Brooks, he felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under him. Riley swallowed hard. Hi, Liam. Margaret, completely oblivious to the suffocating tension, smiled warmly. Oh, you two already know each other. Liam's jaw tightened. Yeah, he said slowly. Margaret clapped her hands together. Oh, wonderful. That makes this even better. She turned to Riley with a proud smile. I told you he was charming. Riley could barely breathe. Liam's eyes never left hers. He was searching her face, putting together the pieces in real time. Why was she here? How did she know his mother? And why did she look like she wanted to be anywhere but here? Margaret, still blissfully unaware, gestured toward the kitchen. Riley has been a wonderful guest. She's been staying with me for a little while. Liam's gaze sharpened instantly. Staying with you? Margaret nodded. Yes, I found her in town a few weeks ago. She was going through a rough time, and I couldn't just leave her like that. So I took her in. Liam's expression darkened. A rough time? It clicked then. The weight she was carrying in her posture, the way she instinctively shielded her stomach when she shifted. And then he saw it, the slight curve of her belly. The world tilted. Liam's blood ran cold. His breath caught in his throat. His heart slammed against his ribs. No, it couldn't be. But it was. She was pregnant. And suddenly, everything made sense. The way she had disappeared. The way she had ignored his calls. The way she had looked at him just now, like she had been dreading this moment for months. Liam's voice was low, dangerously quiet. Riley. She couldn't meet his eyes. Tell me the truth, he demanded, stepping closer. Is it mine? Riley clenched her fists, her pulse pounding. She could feel Margaret's confused stare, could hear her own heartbeat roaring in her ears. But she knew there was no running from this anymore. So she looked up, met Liam's gaze head on, and whispered, Yes. The silence that followed was thick enough to suffocate. Liam just stared at Riley, his face unreadable, his hands clenched at his sides. He wasn't a man who lost control. Not in boardrooms, not in the rooms, not in negotiations, not in life. But right now, he felt like the air had been knocked from his lungs. His mother was speaking, asking something, but he didn't hear a word. All he could hear was Riley's confession repeating in his head. Yes. Yes. That single word had unraveled everything. The tight grip he had on his world, the certainty he had about his life, the careful distance he had tried to put between himself and her. It had all just collapsed. Margaret was the first to break the silence. Wait, what? She asked, her voice laced with confusion. She looked between them, her warm eyes narrowing as realization began to dawn. Riley, what does Liam have to do with this? Riley swallowed hard, her fingers twisting together. There was no escape now. She had to tell the truth. Liam's voice was low, sharp. Tell her. Riley forced herself to look at Margaret, guilt churning inside her. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know you were his mother when you found me. I swear. Margaret's breath caught. So. She looked between them again, piecing it all together. Then her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! Liam exhaled sharply, his control hanging by a thread. How long? Riley looked away. 3 months. 3 months! 3 months since she had left. 3 months since she had disappeared without a word. 3 months she had been carrying his children while he had been completely blind to it. Liam's pulse roared. And you weren't going to tell me. Riley's eyes flashed. I didn't plan for this, Liam, she snapped, her voice raw. I wasn't looking for a way to trap you into something. She let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. I didn't even know how to handle it myself. Liam let out a harsh laugh, one with no humor in it. And your brilliant plan was to just disappear, to let me go on living my life without knowing that he ran a hand through his hair, his control finally cracking, that I have children on the way? Riley flinched at the word. Children. Margaret sat down heavily, still in shock. Twins, she whispered. You're carrying Liam's twins. Riley closed her eyes. Yes. Liam's jaw locked. I deserve to know. Riley's eyes snapped open. And what exactly would you have done, Liam? She challenged, fire creeping into her tone. If I had shown up at your penthouse one day and dropped this on you, would you have actually wanted them? Or would you have thought I was just another person trying to take advantage of your money? Liam froze, because she was right. If she had come to him before, when his mind was still tangled with Sophia and all the games that world played, he wouldn't have believed her. He would have thought it was some kind of scheme, a trick. and he would have pushed her away. Riley let out a tired laugh, shaking her head. See, that's why I left. Liam exhaled slowly, anger battling something else entirely inside him. He wasn't mad just because she had kept this from him. He was mad because, for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do. Margaret, still silent, suddenly stood up. Her eyes, once warm and gentle, were stern now. You two need to talk properly. She turned to Liam. But before you say another word, you need to understand something, Liam. He met his mother's gaze. Margaret's voice softened, but there was steel underneath it. This isn't just about you. Or Riley. This is about those babies. Liam's chest tightened. Babies. His babies. He let out a slow, shaky breath, looking at Riley again. And this time he wasn't angry. He was just lost. Liam had never felt this kind of helplessness before. He had spent his entire life solving problems, negotiating billion-dollar deals, and outmaneuvering some of the sharpest minds in business. But standing there in his mother's home, facing Riley, the woman carrying his twins, he had no strategy, no plan, just chaos. Margaret had given them space to talk, retreating to the garden with a somber expression, but the silence between Liam and Riley was anything but peaceful. Riley sat stiffly on the couch, her fingers knotted together in her lap, while Liam stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, watching her. Finally, she exhaled, breaking the unbearable quiet. So what now? Liam clenched his jaw. That was the question, wasn't it? You tell me, he said, voice controlled but tight. You're the one who made this decision for both of us. What was your end game, Riley? Were you planning to raise them alone? Never tell me? She met his gaze without flinching. I didn't have an end game, Liam. I was surviving. He let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. And now? Riley looked down at her hands, her voice quieter this time. I don't know. Liam sat down across from her, elbows resting on his knees. He studied her, really studied her. She looked different from the last time he had seen her, stronger somehow, but also tired, and beneath the sharp exterior, afraid. She had been carrying this alone. His children. His throat tightened. You should have told me. Riley sighed, shaking her head. I know. Liam wasn't expecting that. No excuses, no defenses, just quiet admission. He leaned back, dragging a hand down his face. God! Riley? Twins! A reluctant smirk played at her lips. Yeah, surprise. Liam huffed a short, disbelieving laugh, but it faded quickly. The reality of it all was still sinking in. I need to be involved, he said firmly. No matter what's happened between us, they're my kids too. Riley nodded slowly. I know that, Liam. Her voice held no resistance, just exhaustion. That, more than anything, made something deep inside Liam ache. He had spent months thinking she had left because she didn't care, that she had walked away without a second thought. But now, seeing the weight on her shoulders, the fight in her eyes slowly dimming, he realized just how wrong he had been. She had left because she thought she had to. And that wasn't something Liam could ignore. The sound of a phone buzzing shattered the moment. Liam glanced at the screen. Sophia. Of course. Riley saw the name flashing on his phone and her expression hardened. So, you and Sophia, she said, arms folding, back together? Liam scowled. No. Riley let out a sharp laugh. Right, because you totally didn't just let that ring through like a guy who's hiding something. Liam sighed. It's complicated. Riley arched a brow. Oh, please, spare me the billionaire drama. Liam exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Why was she so damn frustrating? And why did he? Like it. He shook his head. Look, whatever you think, I don't want Sophia. I never did. Riley tilted her head. Then why did you even hire me in the first place? Liam hesitated. Because I was stupid, and I wanted her out of my life. Riley studied him for a long moment before shaking her head. You're a mess, Carter. Liam smirked. Yeah, and you're not. That startled a laugh out of her. It was small, quick, but real. For a second, the tension between them shifted. Liam leaned forward, his voice softer now. You don't have to do this alone, Riley. She looked at him, something vulnerable flickering behind her tough exterior. And for the first time, she let herself believe it. Sophia sat in front of her vanity mirror, gripping her phone so tightly her fingers ached. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had spent months trying to win Liam back, carefully planting the idea in his mother's head, manipulating every opportunity to remind him of what they had. And now she was losing to Riley Brooks, a mechanic, a woman who didn't belong anywhere near Liam's world. No, this wasn't over. Sophia had spent her life getting exactly what she wanted, and she wasn't about to let some nobody steal the man she had spent years molding into her perfect future. If Riley thought she could waltz back in, carrying Liam's babies, and suddenly have a claim to his life, she was dead wrong. She just had to prove that Liam was making a mistake. And she knew exactly how to do it. Meanwhile, Liam was trying to process everything that had happened. The last few days had changed everything. He had gone from believing Riley had abandoned him to finding out she had been struggling alone, carrying his children, while he had been too distracted with Sophia's schemes to realize what mattered. And now he had to fix it, which meant finally cutting Sophia out of his life for good. The next morning, he met her at one of their usual upscale cafes, a place she had chosen because she liked to be seen. As he slid into the chair across from her, she flashed him a dazzling smile as if nothing was wrong. Liam, she purred, reaching for his hand. Liam pulled back. Cut the act, Sophia. Her smile faltered, but she quickly masked it. I don't know what you mean. Liam leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp. I know what you've been doing, manipulating my mother, trying to dig up dirt on Riley, planting yourself back into my life like you own it. His eyes darkened. It's over. Sophia scoffed, crossing her arms. You think you love her? She asked, her voice coated in disbelief. You're throwing everything away for her? Liam didn't hesitate. Yes. Sophia's eyes flashed with something dangerous. She's using you, Liam. You really think some nobody mechanic didn't see an opportunity the moment she found out she was pregnant with your children? Wake up. Liam laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really don't get it, do you? He shook his head, pushing back his chair. Riley didn't ask for my money. She didn't even ask for my money. She didn't even ask for my help. She walked away because she thought I wouldn't want them. She didn't try to trap me. He stood up, throwing a few bills on the table. That's more than I can say for you. Sophia's jaw tightened. You'll regret this. Liam smiled. A real smile. No, he said simply. I won't. And with that, he walked away. Back at his mother's house, Riley stood on the balcony, watching the sunset. She still wasn't sure how to feel. Liam wanted to be involved, and while that should have made things easier, it only made them more complicated. Because deep down, she wasn't just scared of raising these babies alone. She was scared of letting him in, of believing that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than the arrogant billionaire who had once hired her to break up his relationship. That maybe he could be hers. Thinking too much. She turned to find Liam leaning against the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her with that unreadable expression of his. Riley exhaled. Yeah, it's a bad habit. Liam smirked. Well, let's break it. Before she could respond, he stepped closer, his gaze softer now. Real. I'm not leaving, Riley, he said quietly. Not again. And for the first time, she thought maybe, just maybe, she could believe him. Riley had spent her whole life believing she didn't need anyone, that relying on people only led to disappointment, that love, real love, wasn't something meant for her. But as she lay in a hospital bed, drenched in sweat, clutching Liam's hand so tightly she thought she might break his fingers, she realized something. She did need him, and it terrified her. Just breathe, sweetheart, Liam murmured, his voice steady despite the sheer panic in his eyes. You're almost there. Riley shot him a murderous glare. If you tell me to breathe one more time, Carter, I swear to God. The contraction ripped through her, cutting off whatever threat she had been about to hurl at him. Liam winced as she squeezed his hand tighter, but he didn't pull away. He never pulled away. Almost there, Mrs. Brooks, the doctor said. One more push. Riley gritted her teeth and did as she was told, her entire body burning with the effort. And then the sound of a baby's first cry filled the room. Riley's head fell back against the pillow, exhausted, shaking, overwhelmed. Then another cry followed. Two. Twins. She could barely keep her eyes open, but through the haze of exhaustion, she saw Liam. He was frozen, staring at the tiny, wriggling babies in the doctor's hands like he had just witnessed a miracle. Riley's heart clenched, because, in a way, he had. 2 days later, Riley found Liam standing by the hospital window, holding their son in his arms. She had never seen him like this before. The usually confident, sharp-witted billionaire looked soft, completely wrapped around the tiny human sleeping against his chest. You're a natural, Riley teased, her voice hoarse. Liam turned, smirking. Didn't think I had it in me, huh? Riley smiled, exhaustion weighing heavily on her. Honestly, no. Liam chuckled, shifting slightly to check on their son. Neither did I. She watched him, something warm and terrifying blooming in her chest. This man, the man who had once been a complete disaster in relationships, was standing here, holding their child like he had always been meant to, like this was where he belonged. A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment, and Margaret stepped in, beaming. "Oh, my heart," she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. "Look at you, Liam." Liam smirked but didn't take his eyes off the baby. Not bad for a first-time dad, right? Margaret wiped at her eyes before moving to Riley's bedside, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "You did beautifully, sweetheart." Riley swallowed past the lump in her throat. "Thanks, Mama." Margaret froze. Her eyes went wide, like she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. Then her face crumpled in pure, overwhelming joy. "Oh, my dear," she whispered, pulling Riley into the softest hug she had ever known. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Riley blinked back tears. She hadn't meant to say it. It had just slipped out. But as she hugged Margaret back, she realized something. She meant it. For the first time in her life, she had a real family. 1 year later, Liam and Riley stood in front of a small crowd, saying their vows. The wedding wasn't extravagant. Riley had insisted on keeping it simple, but it was perfect. Margaret held one of the twins in her arms, beaming, while the other clapped excitedly from Liam's best man's arms. As Liam slipped the ring onto Riley's finger, he whispered, "Took you long enough to admit you love me." Riley rolled her eyes, but her heart flipped. "You're lucky I do, Carter." Liam smirked. "I really am." And as he kissed her, soft, deep, real, Riley finally stopped running. Because for the first time in her life, she had something worth staying for. And she wasn't letting it go. Lesson from the story. Life has a way of throwing us into unexpected situations, challenging everything we think we know about ourselves and the world around us. Liam and Riley's journey wasn't just about love. Liam and Riley's journey wasn't just about love. It was about growth, trust, and learning to embrace the unpredictable. For Liam, it took losing control to realize what truly mattered. He spent years believing success and wealth could protect him from disappointment, but in the end, what fulfilled him wasn't money. It was family, love, and the realization that vulnerability wasn't weakness. He learned that real love isn't about power or control, but about showing up even when it's hard. For Riley, the biggest battle wasn't against the circumstances she faced. It was against herself. She had spent her whole life believing she had to be strong alone, that relying on others meant opening herself up to heartbreak. But strength isn't about pushing people away. It's about knowing when to let them in. By allowing Liam and Margaret into her life, she discovered something she never thought she would have: a real home. At its core, this story teaches us that love is more than just words. It's actions. It's choosing someone every day, even when things get messy. It's about knowing that sometimes life doesn't go according to plan. But that doesn't mean it's not exactly where you're meant to be. What about you? What lessons did you take from this story? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Where are you watching from? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another upload. like, share, and stay tuned for more amazing stories. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.